Hey friend, quick note before we dive in. If you've been laid off and are feeling overwhelmed, you're not alone. I've been there myself and have had to navigate this challenge. And that's why we built two things. One, our free school community filled with laid off professionals and partners supporting each other through the ups and downs of being laid off. And two, our layoff recovery course, a structured path to help you rebuild faster and move forward with clarity. Both links will be in the show notes for you to explore. With that, let's get right to the episode. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Laid Off Legends podcast, where we come together to listen to layoff stories and relevant expertise with the focus on finding inspiration, encouragement, and guidance for the laid off professional community. I'm your host, Leo, a former Microsoft principal PM that was laid off last October. Career changes don't impact just paychecks. They ripple through families, relationships, and identities. Today, we're joined by Dr. Valdeja DeJean again, a
Thank you.
nationally recognized psychiatrist, speaker, author, and mental health advocate to explore how career transitions reshape the emotional fabric of the home. Together, we'll unpack real strategies for navigating tough conversations, setting healthy boundaries, and maintaining connection and resilience during seasons of change. If you've ever felt tension between who you are and who your family needs you to be when it comes to a layoff or times of career transition, this conversation is for you. Dr. DeJean, welcome back to the Laid Off Legends podcast.
Thanks for having me back.
The feedback from our previous session was fantastic, and your insights on navigating that uncertainty was very helpful to our audience. So thank you for coming again.
I'm glad it was helpful. Thank you.
As we talk about layoffs, we often tend to focus on the individual who lost their job, but then there's also a ripple effect in their family, their relationships, and their community. Could you help us understand the ripple effect a layoff has on the family system? Take us behind closed doors. What does this look like?
Anxiety has a contagion effect. It truly does. And when someone senses anxiety in others, you really have to be intentional about not internalizing that level of anxiety as well. So the ripple effect is basically a lot of the emotions of the person who has just been laid off is absorbed by the family, whether that's the sadness of it, the anxiety, the grief, the loss. So family members are hurting too. And it's hurtful to see your family hurting.
When people are laid off, where do they begin when it comes to talking with their loved ones as they start to reconcile this information?
One of the first things is if you already know that there might be a threat of layoff, I think it's important to go ahead and have that conversation with your spouse. Many people, they say, well, I'm not going to worry about it until it's happening. To some degree, that could be helpful. But if you're not communicating that to your spouse, if there's a threat even there, then it limits how much family planning you can do to preserve your financial security. So you can be proactive if you let your family know that this could be down the pipeline for my career. But once the layoff does happen, the key is to try to take a moment to process it for yourself, to understand it for yourself, and then create a time, an environment, and structure to go ahead and have that crucial conversation with your spouse. It's funny, Leo, you wouldn't believe this. Sometimes there's so much avoidance and denial in this that I have seen cases where the shame and denial and anxiety around it has caused people to go as far as not actually tell their spouse for months that they've been laid off. I know of a case where someone actually got up to work every morning and pretended as if they were going to a job just to avoid telling their spouse. There's so much shame around this. But so the first thing that you do, you create the environment, you take the time to have the conversation, acknowledge your feelings about how it is for you, and ask the partner, how is it for them? What are they afraid of? And just have an honest conversation. The truth of the matter is, not everyone feels comfortable accessing vulnerability. And sometimes you can be, in general, okay to access your own vulnerability, but you may not feel emotionally safe with your partner in accessing the vulnerability. So it's also on the partner who is not the one that's facing the layoff to create an environment of emotional safety. So that looks like, even if I feel upset about it, I don't judge it, I don't critique, I don't blame. I reserve those things and try to manage that before I have that conversation.
I want to go back to the feeling of shame and why we're not as open to sharing this with the closest people in our lives. How do we break down that wall of shame so I'm more comfortable in sharing this with my loved ones? Are there ways you've seen folks actually face this head on? Because the longer it goes, the harder it becomes to share this really important news.
Yes, I think the first thing is we try to understand shame from for what it is and for why it's there. And part of the shame comes from the fact that society has created this standard of what it means to be employed and what it means in terms of gender roles in terms of employments. I think that men have it a little bit worse because there's this societal standard that men should be the provider, and those traditional standards are still upheld by many people in their narratives and beliefs about life. We try to understand that, and then we make a mindset shift where, like, we don't have to operate by the same paradigm of what the society tells us to do. You be making that conscious choice. And then I think it's important to try to go back to what we talked about in terms of mindset of seeing your identity not being solely tied to a career or profession. And in terms of being a provider, there's so many aspects of provision. Sometimes we produce, for instance, a male figure as just only a financial provider. But no, you provide your time, you provide your emotional support, you provide nurturing your children, you provide romantic love and expressions of love. So if we can reframe and reshape that paradigm, then we can choose to leave those societal standards behind and operate in your own narrative.
One of the pieces of research I found as we were preparing for this episode was from a professor out of the London School of Economics, Professor Rao, and she talked about that difference between traditional gender roles in the family and how they're perceived. For men, there is a lot more shame because there's an obligation, and support is not so much there as much as it is judgment for the traditional male provider. And then for the traditional female role, there was more acceptance that, okay, you've been laid off, you can spend more time with your family, and it's okay for you to do so. And so it was really interesting how society reinforces some of these things, but then also makes it very difficult to manage over time.
Very interesting how that works.
I love what you did during our last episode where you actually walked us through an example. We talked about layoff juice and the hard conversation that you could have if somebody was laid off. Could we do a little bit of role play? A provider, and this could be male or female, having received the news that they've been laid off. What would that conversation look like? Let's start with them driving home and thinking about the conversation. Could you walk us through what that could look like in a very healthy way?
Okay. So the first thing as you're driving home, you allow yourself to feel those emotions. Cry, be sad, be mad, be disappointed. Just feel all of that. If you need to say it out loud or, talk to a close friend on your way home to get coached about, like, I'm going to have this conversation, call your biggest cheerleader. Sometimes people don't discern who to call to get that support. Call someone who's proven that they're going to cheerlead you on to help support you in having this conversation. So that may look like a parent, a best friend, or a mentor. So after you felt your feelings, you assess the environment when you get home and make sure the timing is right. If kids are running around, that's not the time. Wait till everyone goes to bed and say, hey, we need to talk. And then I would just simply say, I am upset to let you know that today I got laid off. I know that this is probably scary for you just as much as it is for me, but reassurance I think is key. We're going to be okay. And I'm going to have some plans in place so that we can make sure we are okay. I think that last piece is important because there can be a hysteria and panic that can happen around that. And sometimes that creates issues where the spouse feels like they're not getting weighed in on what is the plan, what is it going to look like. And I think it's hard sometimes, especially if you're used to being that role of the breadwinner, to sometimes take feedback, but try to be open to what the spouse's suggestions might be, because you'll be surprised. There might be some helpful tips that they can offer.
That's a powerful example. And so if we put the hat on the spouse, what would the healthiest reaction look like?
The best thing that spouse can do is say, be honest about what they're feeling. I'm scared, but I believe in you. I know what you're capable of. We're going to be okay. The spouse needs to be the biggest cheerleader. Another thing that I think is important is everyone has different love languages. So sometimes people assume they know how to best support the spouse who's been laid off because they think, well, if it were me, I would want them to do this or I would want them to do that. But that's not always the case because things resonate with people in different ways. So I think it's important to say, what would you need from me and what do you continue to need from me and as we go through this together? What would support look like for you? And having clarity on that is important. I see this a lot with men who have lost their job and the wife is a very driven person and they're an executive themselves. And so they'll submit a whole bunch of applications and posts to the husband. But if they're already feeling ashamed and insecure about the loss, that can feel like enormous pressure. So that would be an example of how you don't want to over exert. You want to know what they need. Now, some people might welcome that because they're overwhelmed themselves, but some people that may feel like it may be experienced as emasculating, or it may be experienced as too much pressure, or you don't trust that I can do this myself and find a new job myself. So being a cheerleader, asking what they need is most important. The next thing I would say is um, to create structure and in the timing of how often you have these conversations about the layoff. Sometimes people need a break. So some people may not be able to tolerate talking about that every day. So maybe we do a weekly check-in and we pledge not to talk about this until the weekend or something like that because the cadence and frequency needs to be mutually agreed upon.
I really like that system and format in the sense that there is openness around the challenge. There is faith that, okay, this is going to get better and we're going to do it together. I really love that sense of, okay, you're facing the truth, you are accepting the real the reality of what's happened, but then there's a determination that everything is going to be okay. You're going to be able to work it out together. Could we bring in some external people now into this conversation? Many times the shame ripples out. So we don't really want to tell everybody that the breadwinner lost their job. And so we were going to keep it a secret as a family. But then things start to hit around Christmas presents and going out for dinners with other families. How do families that have been laid off and are now adapting to the new reality, how do they share that news with their network?
That is a really good question. I believe in the power of vulnerability. I really do. But I also believe that vulnerability is a gift that you only give to people who deserve the right to know. I do think that's a very delicate balance of figuring out who do we feel emotionally safe and won't judge us and won't criticize us or spread our business, it's across the community. That's important. So it's about, let's talk about who we trust with this information. You sit down and say, who do we trust? There also might be situations where you really want to think about, do you need help? If you don't have a huge savings, is it possible that you might need some help from your parents? Let's say you're early couple, you just recently married, you're young, and this layoff happens early. You want to evaluate if too much secrecy it might undermine yourself from getting the support you need. So it's important to think about, hey, if we may need some help, we may want to, get our parents to weigh in on this or our aunts and uncles or whoever may have resources in the family. So that's something you mutually agree. And sometimes one person may think we should share and the other person doesn't. So that's also very tricky. But I think it would be saying, well, this is the reason why I think we should share this with this person. But in the early goings, you want to respect that partner's wishes if you can.
I like the approach around constantly checking in and being in agreement as a team. This happened to us as a family. We're going to face this as a family. We're going to decide who and when and how. And that ripples out into financial decisions, discussions with others. So that initial conversation and transparency sets the tone almost for the subsequent kind of journey. And no matter how long that is, having those conversations regularly is a very healthy thing. Do you have a sense of how this plays out over time? It's one thing to have this conversation on the day of the layoff, but then a week goes by, 2 weeks, a month, and we're seeing really, really long lead times as folks apply, they get rejected, or they don't apply, they don't hear back from these companies, or they go on long interview loops and then they reach the end, and then of course the job is an offer, which is another painful setback.
Yes.
What does the persistence and the tenacity and just sticking with this plan, what does that look like as a family and they're doing this together? Because sometimes it's the person that's applying and being rejected and going and trying could be bearing the brunt of a lot of this emotion. How does the family unit play in supporting that individual as they go through that fight to find another role?
That is a good point about the timeline because it can get harder and harder as time progresses. In terms of those families who have adjusted well, here are some of the things I've seen. Let's say you have a spouse who's a homemaker. I think what has been wonderful if the homemaker is willing to go help out and shift the paradigm of the marriage that they've envisioned. Maybe they both always wanted to have that where one would stay at home, one was out, in the field working. But the willingness to pivot, the willingness to say, well, I'm willing to try to go out here. Or maybe I've seen people start a little side hustle business that they can still do in home, like arts and crafts or selling jewelry and things like that, just to show that they're trying and they're in this with them, you know? I also think that the power of those structured check-ins can help too. So that what do you want to do now? Or let's just go take a walk together, or offering some support. And again, asking what can we do in those moments where you feel so deflated after you've gone to the fourth round of interviews and nothing happens? How can I help you? On the person who continues to get rejected is also important that they don't limit their value to financial provision, so that they maybe do some more housekeeping, go take a break in, run some errands, do some things that you wouldn't conventionally do, so that you're showing, like, I know that this is tough on everyone, but just know that I'm trying to show you that I know that there's value in other places that I can fit in.
So really keep the contribution or extend the contribution, not just financial, but then also around the home. So there's a sense of fulfillment as an individual, but then also contribution to the family unit.
That's right.
And the spouse, how is the spouse helping throughout this entire journey? You're saying regularly check in, continue to find ways to keep that person supported.
Right. To continue to cheerlead, to continue to ask if you need anything, to be willing to do more and getting creative with their own financial contributions, to not have to be asked to save. Because strikingly, I've seen one spouse continue to spend excessively, even though there's this dip in income because of the layoff. So, to suggest ideas of how we can budget and streamline so we can cut costs.
That's real talk. That because that's where it hits. It hits. It's the money. That's where it hits. Really.
Right. It's also important each partner examine their relationship with money, because that's a whole nother thing. Some people have a trauma of scarcity. So a layoff can really send them into a crisis because they once developmentally had times that were rough or times of lack.
You mentioned this mindset of scarcity. We all grew up, our parents, our grandparents, we had this relationship with money. And I have found it very much influences how we think about money today.
Yes.
In the case of a household where this is happening, how do the parents help the children understand and think about resources and coming together as a family in a really healthy way so that it doesn't become a negative permanent imprint?
And of course, that's age dependent. But if there are younger kids, say, just briefly say, hey, we lost our job, but we're going to be okay. But to be proactive, saying, when Christmas or your birthday comes, we may not be able to get the same number of gifts that we usually can give you. So you're setting an expectation. But when we get back on track, you will begin to receive things as it is. If there's a teenager saying there's going to be a little bit of streamlining of our budget because of this, but if there are things you want, feel free to go get a job to get those extra things that you want. Now, what we don't want to do, which I have seen this happen, where we inappropriately expect the teens to then contribute financially and make them like a third party provider. That creates a pattern of financial enmeshment that can impact the child's psychology of money down the line with their own family. And I have seen that happen, unfortunately, where the kid is working 3 jobs and going to school, and the parent, they are expected to bring this money to the table in a way. I don't think that's healthy for children.
That's a really tough place to be as a young adult because at some point you're trying to find your own identity, and then suddenly you're thrust into a lot of these obligations, hoping that as these layoffs become more prevalent, we'll have more education on those things and how families can really help build a family unit that is resilient against a lot of these things. I tend to be very practical. I'm kind of
Yeah.
like a what do we do on Monday morning kind of person. What are some of the practical things that families can do outside this job search
Mhm.
that can really help maintain the fabric of family and the fabric of, hey, we'll be okay. Let's continue to do these things. Let's build these family habits
Mhm.
that can help us be strong in this tested time.
I love that question because, sometimes we don't always see the beauty in pain, but I have seen so much beauty come out of pain. So there is an opportunity here. There is an opportunity for restructuring the family to getting back to the grassroots things of what makes people happy. So here's one thing I would say. Sometimes people lose out on some of their money and then they start undermining the healthy systems that are in place within the family that help them emotionally. For instance, like the first thing that goes, okay, let's get rid of the gym membership. But maybe you're a really fitness guru and that's the thing that keeps you vibrant and happy. So maybe that's not the first thing you cut, your gym membership. Here's another one I get. Okay, Dr. John, I can't see you anymore. I lost my job. It's like, okay, but don't you have like 500K in savings? Is that what you want to do first? The very person who's supporting you through crisis, you're going to stop that relationship? You really want to think about those things of how you could be undermining your foundation to help you actually get through the crisis. So, as a family, I think don't stop those things that really keep the family bonded. Secondly, I would say get creative. For instance, during the pandemic, we couldn't go many places. So, part of the beauty and the pain for me was I was really enjoying the art of playing with my son in a way that doesn't always happen. We would be in the park so much time playing games, and sometimes you really don't see that. So it's like there is this opportunity, despite the pain, to really spend more quality time, see the benefits of it as you're in transition, I would say, as a family. So spend more time together, get creative with fun activities, game night, stuff that doesn't cost money.
That's such great insight. And as we extend this to this group of loving, trusted people, do you have any insights on the role of really close friends and how close friends can support folks that they know are going through a layoff period?
Yes, really close friends, they can do the job of normalizing it. Saying things like, in this economy, the people who are still working, it's because they happen to choose an industry that's more viable and sustainable, like teaching or medicine. It's not that anyone's not smarter or whatever. So that type of reassurance. This is normal. A lot of people getting laid off, that kind of normalizing it to show them you're not judging them. Saying stuff that's validating, like, that company's missing out on you and they'll see it one day. Things like that. We can do a lot just to build the esteem that's already being dismantled, probably internally. So, lifting them up, affirming them, normalizing the culture. And then there are people who've been laid off that their friends may not even know. Being honest about your own layoff, if you've had that experience, coming out of the closet of like, hey, back 10 years ago when I wouldn't call it, I was laid off then too. But now I realize I shouldn't have judged myself, and you're in good company. Those kind of affirming. And then they can also use their network. Most people have someone they know that they can refer. So being open with that network and not being like stingy about it. Some people don't help other people when they really could.
I have found it's so powerful where you mentioned love languages earlier. Our close friends know who we are and what we need. I'm grateful for the friends that I'm blessed with. Many times when we have a conversation, it's actually not about the job. Normalizing it many times is actually taking my mind off the stress and taking my mind
Mhm.
off the thing and like, oh, let's go grab a drink. Oh, and we talk about everything but
Oh,
the job.
yes, that's a
And then
really good point, Leo.
and it just comes back to, wow, okay, great. The world didn't crash. We're gonna wake up tomorrow morning, start the hunt, do the thing. But ultimately, they weren't friends because of the job. So the job isn't there. Nope,
Yes.
they're still there. They're still loyal. They're still friends, and they are committed to making you great. It's you know who your circle is, and you know who your people are, and I think that that's one of the most powerful things about going through these types of times with a circle that is your ride or die day
Yes.
one's group of people.
That is such a good point about this art of pause. Like, okay, it was a bad day, and chalking it up to just it was a bad day, and go have some fun because it really does help you reset. Just like you said, just go have some fun that day to
Mhm.
take your mind off it for a little while.
Have you observed families get stronger out of things like this?
Yes, yes. There is something to be said when you feel like you have, as a family, gotten out of huge crisis. It builds a collective esteem for the family to say, you know what? I now know that I have my person, I have my people, that it's me against the world. The bond that that creates for the people who get through it is amazing. And we're in such a materialistic society. To know that someone still accepted you and loved you unconditionally despite that job loss, there's nothing more rewarding for that in the art of love, especially today's society where everything is based on condition, and a lot based on money. That bond will carry you through a lifetime of marriage and just give hope and esteem to the family unit as a whole.
I love this conversation because it takes us behind the scenes. When we go out, everybody puts a mask on. But when you come
Yes.
back and you're with your family, real talk, you have to address these things. And some of the things you've mentioned have really, really opened up a sense of possibility. Hey, it's okay. That's your team. And
Mhm.
so I love what you said. Prepare for it before it happens. When it does happen, face it, deal with yourself, and then come back and find your team and process it together. And then keep the things going that will enable you to do this over time. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And you've just got to hang on. So that's really amazing. As we wrap, Dr. Jean, what should people be thinking about if you were to put a message to families that
Mhm.
are going through a layoff experience on a billboard? What would it be?
I would encourage every person who's facing layoff to ask their partner and other family members, children, or whoever, what other value do I bring to your life outside of my financial provision? Because there's too much focus, I believe, right now among that. Now, money is important, we know that. But you've got to know the other ways in which you matter. We have seen too many suicides, and men, especially, and this is middle-aged men. That's the highest suicide, one of the highest suicide risks, who've lost jobs or lost money in the stock market or stuff. And that's because they did not understand their value outside of that one facet of their existence. So I think that's what the question can be asked. And then if they don't ask the question, the other partner can tell them all about their value outside of that. Like, you make me laugh every day. You bring joy into my life. You're such a great father. They need to hear those things. so that they're not hyper focused on that in a way that their self-esteem becomes debased.
Thank you for sharing that. So relatable and so powerful for folks to hear. All, thank you. This has been a tremendous conversation with Dr. DeJean. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. I answer them personally and will pull in Dr. DeJean as need be as those questions come in. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the Layoff Legends channel. We'll have more videos like this, and YouTube will also show you a video that it believes you'll enjoy. Thank you again for the time, and we'll see you next time.